Sometimes a father's greatest inheritance isn't what glitters, but what lies hidden in dust. When a father passes, he leaves choices that reveal his children. Big Daddy Vance gave his eldest sons a cattle empire worth millions. To Jasper, his youngest, he left the dusty corner, a crumbling gas station on a forgotten road. His brothers laughed, joking Jasper could sell air to tumbleweeds. Bitter, Jasper drove out with a sledgehammer, ready to burn it for insurance. But when his hammer struck the back wall, the plaster revealed a steel door with a government seal. What Jasper found behind that door would change everything. But what secret could turn a laughingstock into the most powerful man in the county? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The reading of the will took place on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, when the Texas heat had finally begun to ease and the light slanting through the attorney's office windows held that particular golden quality that makes a man think about time passing. Jasper Vance sat in the back row of leather chairs, his worn boots crossed at the ankle, his hat resting on his knee. He hadn't worn a suit. Didn't own one anymore, truth be told. The denim shirt and jeans would have to do, same as they'd done for the last 15 years of working other men's ranches for day wages. His brothers sat up front, of course, Marcus and Garrett Vance, dressed in their Sunday best, which for them meant tailored suits that probably cost more than Jasper made in 6 months. They sat with their wives, sleek women with careful hair and practiced smiles, and they didn't look back at him once. Not once in the 40 minutes they'd all been waiting for old Theodore Bramlett to shuffle his papers and clear his throat. Big Daddy Vance had been dead 3 days. Heart attack in his sleep, the doctor said. Peaceful, quick, the kind of death every rancher hopes for after a life spent working hard under an unforgiving sun. 82 years old and still riding fence lines until the week before he died. Still making decisions about cattle sales and water rights and which hands to keep come winter. Still running the largest cattle operation in 3 counties with an iron will and a mind sharp as a new blade. Still angry at his youngest son for reasons Jasper had stopped trying to understand about a decade ago. Theodore Bramlett finally stood, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been Big Daddy's attorney for 40 years, and he looked every day of his own 75 years. Gentlemen, he said, nodding to include Jasper in the address, though his brothers didn't acknowledge it. Ladies, thank you for your patience. The last will and testament of James Robert Vance, known to all as Big Daddy, is relatively straightforward. He was a man who knew his own mind. That drew a faint smile. From Marcus, the eldest at 48, he had Big Daddy's build, broad through the shoulders, thick through the middle, and the same commanding presence. Garrett, 45, was leaner, quieter, but he had the family's steel-gray eyes. Both of them had worked the ranch since they were old enough to sit a horse. Both had earned their father's respect in ways Jasper, at 42, apparently never had. The Vance Ranch, Bramlett continued, comprising approximately 43,000 acres of deeded land, plus grazing rights to an additional 12,000 acres of BLM land, along with all livestock, equipment, buildings, and water rights appurtenant thereto, is left in equal shares to Marcus James Vance and Garrett Robert Vance. The brothers nodded, satisfied, expected. Their wives exchanged pleased glances. The ranch house and its contents go to Marcus, as the eldest. The foreman's house and outbuildings go to Garrett. The division of livestock and equipment shall be handled according to the schedule outlined in Appendix A, which you'll receive copies of. Bramlett paused, shuffling papers. The pause stretched long enough that Jasper felt the first stirring of something in his chest. Not hope. He'd given up on that where his father was concerned. But curiosity, maybe. Wonder about whether the old man had left him anything at all, or if he'd been written out completely. To my youngest son, Jasper William Vance, Bramlett read. And now Marcus and Garrett did turn around, wearing matching expressions of mild amusement. I leave the property known as the Dusty Corner, including the land, structures, and all contents therein. The silence that followed lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Then Garrett laughed, a short, sharp bark of genuine surprise. Marcus joined in, shaking his head. Even their wives smiled, though they had the grace to try hiding it behind their hands. The gas station, Marcus said, still chuckling. He left you the goddamn gas station. And the store, Garrett added. Don't forget the store, all those valuable tumbleweeds. The dusty corner. Jasper knew it, of course. Everyone in the county knew it. It sat 40 miles east of the ranch, out where Highway 54 used to run before they built the interstate 15 miles north back in 1982. It had been a combination gas station, general store, and rest stop back when that stretch of two-lane blacktop carried tourists and truckers through the high desert country. Big Daddy had bought it in 1968, run it as a side business for a decade, then shuttered it when the interstate opened and the traffic disappeared. That was 43 years ago. Jasper had driven past it a few times over the years. The last time, maybe 5 years back, it had been a sun-bleached wreck slowly surrendering to the desert. Broken windows, collapsed canopy over the gas pumps, a faded Coca-Cola sign hanging by one corner. The kind of place you see rotting along forgotten roads all across the West. A monument to the fact that nothing lasts, that progress moves on, that time takes everything in the end. Mr. Bramlett, Marcus said, turning back to the attorney. What's the property worth? The land itself, I mean. Bramlett consulted his papers. The parcel is 12 acres. Given its location and condition, the county assessor values it at approximately $42,000. That's primarily land value. The structures themselves have negligible worth. 42,000, Garrett repeated, glancing back at Jasper with a grin. Well, little brother, you can probably get 30 for it if you find the right buyer. Maybe enough to buy yourself a decent truck, or rent for a few years, Marcus added. Daddy always did say you'd need taking care of. Jasper said nothing. He'd learned long ago that responding to his brothers only encouraged them. He kept his expression neutral, his hands still, his breathing even. Inside, he felt the old, familiar weight. Part anger, part resignation, part something deeper he'd never quite found words for. His father had been dead 3 days, and even from the grave, the old man had found a way to make clear exactly how he'd felt about his youngest son. Bramlett cleared his throat. There are also some personal effects. Marcus and Garrett, your father left you each his grandfather's pocket watches. They're with the items at the ranch. Jasper, there's a sealed envelope for you. Your father's instructions were that you were to read it privately at the Dusty Corner property. He produced a manila envelope from his desk, aged and thick. Jasper's name was written across the front in his father's strong, angular handwriting. The attorney held it out, and Jasper had to rise and walk the length of the office to take it. His brothers watched him the whole way, smirking. Don't spend it all in one place, Garrett said. Outside, in the parking lot, Jasper stood in the slanting September light and turned the envelope over in his hands. It was sealed with tape, heavy with something more than just a letter. He could open it now, right here, but his father's instruction had been specific. Read it at the property. Maybe the old man wanted him to see exactly what he'd been left, wanted him to stand in the ruins of the Dusty Corner and understand just how little he'd mattered. Maybe that was fitting. Maybe Jasper deserved it for whatever he'd done or failed to do that had driven the wedge between them so deep. He thought about the last time he'd seen his father alive. 3 years ago, at the county fair. They'd passed each other near the livestock barns. Big Daddy had looked right through him as if he were a stranger. Jasper had nodded anyway, said, Daddy, got nothing back. Just those steel-gray eyes, the same eyes Jasper saw in his own mirror, moving past him without recognition. That was when Jasper had finally accepted that whatever bridge might have once existed between them had burned. Completely. You can't rebuild what's turned to ash. He climbed into his truck, a '98 Ford with 200,000 miles and a temperamental starter, and sat there for a long minute before starting the engine. Through the attorney's window, he could see his brothers shaking Bramlett's hand, all smiles. They had what they'd expected, what they'd earned through decades of loyalty and hard work and being the sons Big Daddy wanted. Jasper had a gas station on a dead highway and an envelope full of what? A final lecture? An explanation? An apology? He almost laughed at that last thought. Big Daddy Vance apologizing. That would be something to see. The drive east took him out of town, past the ranch turnoff, where he didn't slow down, and into country that grew more sparse and severe with every mile. The land here rolled in long, gentle swells, covered in sparse grass and sage, cut through by dry arroyos and dotted with juniper. It was beautiful in its way, if you understood the language of it. Jasper had always understood. He'd grown up riding these ranges, helping with roundups, fixing fence, learning the names of the springs and the good grass, and the places where cattle would gather in summer heat. All of that belonged to his brothers now. All 43,000 acres of it. The dusty corner came into view just as the sun touched the horizon. The light painted everything gold and red and long shadow, which made the ruin look almost romantic for a moment, almost noble. Then Jasper got closer, and the reality of it settled over him like dust. The main building was a long, low structure of faded wood and crumbling stucco, maybe 50 feet across. The gas pumps out front were antique, the kind with the rolling numbers and the glass tops. The canopy that had once sheltered them leaned at a dangerous angle, held up by 2 posts, while the third had given way. The store's plate glass windows were mostly broken, covered now with weathered plywood. The Coca-Cola sign hung by a single bolt, spinning slowly in the evening breeze. Behind the main building stood a smaller structure. Storage, probably, or maybe living quarters for whoever had run the place back in the day. Its roof had partially collapsed. The whole property was surrounded by a chain-link fence that had fallen in several places. Tumbleweeds had piled against it in drifts. The only sound was the wind moving through broken things. Jasper parked and sat in the truck's cab, engine ticking as it cooled. In the envelope on the seat beside him, his father's final message waited. Around him, $42,000 worth of desert real estate slowly returned to the land it had briefly tried to conquer. He thought about insurance, thought about how much a policy on a worthless structure might pay out if the place burned down accidentally, thought about the sledgehammer in the bed of his truck, waiting. His brothers were right about one thing. $30,000 would buy a decent truck. Maybe enough left over for first and last month's rent on a real apartment instead of the room he rented above the feed store in town. Jasper took the envelope and climbed out into the cooling evening air. The desert smelled like sage and dust and thyme. His boots crunched on gravel as he walked toward the building, fishing keys from his pocket, old keys that Bramlett had given him, brass and heavy, probably original to the place. The front door's lock still worked, surprisingly. It turned with a rusty complaint, and the door swung inward on hinges that shrieked. Inside, the failing light showed him a long room with empty shelves along one wall, a counter along the back, and layers of dust over everything. The floor was linoleum, buckled in places. The ceiling tiles sagged. Something had nested in one corner. The droppings and debris spoke of mice or pack rats. It smelled like abandonment, like the end of things. Jasper stood in the center of the room and opened the envelope. Inside, he found a single sheet of paper in his father's handwriting, and beneath it, something else. Something heavy and metallic that clinked as he drew it out. A key, brass, old, but different from the door keys. This one had a number stamped on it. 7. The letter was brief. Jasper, you never understood why I was hard on you. Maybe I never explained it right. Your brothers are ranchers because that's all they can be. You were always different, always asking questions, always looking at things sideways. That worried me, made me push you away, made me try to make you into something you weren't. I see now that was my mistake, not yours. The dusty corner isn't what it seems. Neither are you. Key 7 fits the lock in the back wall. What you do with what's there is your choice. I hope you choose better than I did. Dad. Jasper read it twice, then a third time. His hands weren't quite steady. The back wall was exactly where you'd expect it to be. Behind the counter, separating the retail space from what had probably been storage or an office, it looked like any other interior wall. Stucco over what was presumably wood framing, painted a dingy cream color that might have been white 40 years ago. Water stains spread across it like continents on a map. In one spot, the stucco had cracked and fallen away, showing the structure beneath. Jasper stood before it with his father's letter in one hand and the brass key in the other. He'd read the letter 5 times now, and each reading left him more unsettled than the last. Your brothers are ranchers because that's all they can be. You were always different. What did that mean? And what could possibly be hidden behind this wall that would matter to anyone, let alone change anything? The sun had set fully now. Jasper had gone back to his truck for the flashlight he kept behind the seat and the sledgehammer in the bed. He'd also grabbed the bottle of water and the half-empty pack of Marlboros he'd been rationing. His hands needed something to do while he thought. He set the flashlight on the counter, angled so its beam lit the wall. Then he lit a cigarette and smoked it slowly, studying the plaster, looking for, what, a seam, a hidden panel. The letter said, "Lock in the back wall," but he didn't see anything that looked like a lock. Just stained, crumbling stucco in a building that should have been condemned years ago. Maybe the old man had finally lost his mind in those last days. Maybe the heart attack had been preceded by confusion, by delusions. Maybe there was nothing here at all except a cruel final joke. Send the disappointment son on a treasure hunt through a ruin. Let him hope for just a moment that he mattered. Jasper crushed out the cigarette under his boot heel and picked up the sledgehammer. If there was nothing behind this wall except wood and insulation, he'd know in about 30 seconds. And if his father had been playing a game, well, he wouldn't be around to see Jasper burn the place down. The first swing was tentative, testing. The hammer's head punched through the stucco easily, sending up a cloud of dust and revealing darkness behind. Not wood, not insulation, empty space. Jasper pulled the hammer back and swung again, harder. Then again, the stucco came away in great chunks, falling to the floor in explosions of dust and debris. He worked methodically, left to right, top to bottom, until he'd cleared a section about 4 feet wide. Behind the stucco was exactly what his father's letter had promised, a wall of steel. Jasper stepped back, breathing hard, covered in white dust. The flashlight beam showed him what looked like a vault door, heavy steel plate, riveted, with a circular locking mechanism in the center. And there, just to the right of the lock, was a keyhole, brass, tarnished but unmistakable. Above the door, barely visible beneath decades of accumulated dust, was a seal. Jasper wiped it clean with his sleeve and leaned close. The eagle and shield were faded but recognizable, the official seal of the United States government. Beneath it, stenciled letters, authorized personnel only, and below that, a number, Site 7. Jasper's heart was hammering now, and not from exertion. He'd lived through enough history to know what this probably was. The Cold War had left its marks all over the West. Decommissioned missile silos, abandoned radar stations, forgotten listening posts buried in places no one would think to look. The government had been paranoid in those days, convinced the Russians were coming, building secret installations in the middle of nowhere, and then forgetting about them when the threat passed. But why here? Why had Big Daddy bought a gas station that was really a disguise for a government facility? And how had he gotten away with it? Jasper's hands shook slightly as he fitted the brass key into the lock. It slid in smoothly, too smoothly for something that had supposedly been untouched. For decades, someone had maintained this. Someone had kept the mechanism clean and functional. His father. It had to have been his father. The key turned with a solid, well-oiled click. The circular mechanism began to rotate, and Jasper heard the sound of heavy bolts withdrawing, then silence. He pulled, and the door swung open on hinges that moved without a sound. The smell that emerged was stale, but not unpleasant. Air that had been sealed away, recycled, filtered, preserved. The flashlight beam showed him a metal stairway leading down into darkness. The walls were concrete, painted white, perfectly preserved. At the bottom of the stairs, perhaps 20 feet down, he could see a floor of polished linoleum reflecting his light back at him. Jasper descended slowly, one hand on the railing, the flashlight beam sweeping ahead of him. The temperature dropped as he went down, not cold, but noticeably cooler than the desert evening above. The air had that particular quality of underground spaces, that sense of being separated from the world of weather and wind and time. The bunker at the bottom was larger than he'd expected. The stairs opened into a corridor that branched in 3 directions. The walls were lined with pipes and conduits. Fluorescent lights hung from the ceiling, dark now but looking as if they might still work if the power were on. Signs on the walls pointed to different areas: communications, power systems, living quarters, records. Jasper followed the sign for records. It led him to a room 20 feet square, lined floor to ceiling with metal filing cabinets and shelves. There was a desk in the center with an old office chair, a typewriter covered with a dust cloth, and a lamp. On the desk sat a metal document box with another number stamped on top, 7. The key from his father's envelope opened this box as well. Inside were papers. Lots of papers. Jasper carried the box to the desk and sat down, laying out the contents under his flashlight beam. What he found made no sense at first. Property deeds, county records, water rights certificates, survey maps, legal documents thick with language he only partially understood. But as he read, as he pieced together what he was seeing, a picture began to form that took his breath away. In 1962, at the height of the Cold War, the United States government had purchased 48,000 acres of land in 3 counties, including this one. They'd done it quietly, through shell corporations and intermediaries, paying above market value but requiring absolute secrecy. The land was needed for a network of listening posts and early warning stations designed to monitor for Soviet missile launches and radio transmissions. The purchases included not just the surface rights, but the water rights. All of them, every spring, every well, every drop of water that fell on that land or flowed beneath it. When the Cold War ended and the stations were decommissioned in 1991, the government had been required by law to return the land to civilian hands. They'd sold it through sealed bids, and in this county there had been only one bidder, James Robert Vance, known as Big Daddy, who'd submitted a bid so low it was almost insulting, $2,000. The government, eager to unload the property and the liability, had accepted. Big Daddy Vance had acquired the land and promptly done nothing with it, had told no one, had left it empty and apparently forgotten. But he'd kept the water rights, all of them. And according to the maps Jasper was now studying with growing comprehension, that land and those water rights included. He traced his finger along the survey lines, following the borders, checking and rechecking because it couldn't possibly be right. But it was right. The government land wrapped around the Vance ranch on 3 sides. The water rights included the 3 main springs that supplied the ranch, the underground aquifer that fed the wells, and the seasonal creek that ran through the north pasture. Big Daddy Vance hadn't owned the ranch free and clear. He'd been living on government land, using government water rights that he'd purchased for $2,000 and never told his sons about. Which meant Jasper sat back in the chair, his mind racing. Which meant that the property now belonged to Jasper, and with it, the water rights. And without water rights in this country, you couldn't ranch, couldn't keep cattle, couldn't do anything except watch your land turn to dust. Marcus and Garrett had inherited a cattle empire built on land and water they didn't legally control. Jasper had inherited a worthless gas station that was really the key to the entire county. His brothers didn't know. Couldn't know. If they'd known, they would never have been so cavalier, would never have laughed. Jasper spread the documents on the desk before him, reading by flashlight, checking dates and signatures and legal language. Everything appeared legitimate. Everything was properly recorded with the county, though buried in files so old they'd probably been converted to microfiche and forgotten decades ago. His father had done this deliberately, had kept this secret for more than 30 years, had let his sons build their lives and their plans around a ranch they thought they owned, while the real control lay hidden beneath a ruined gas station. The question was why? Why had Big Daddy set things up this way? Why give the ranch to Marcus and Garrett if he knew they didn't truly control it? Why give Jasper the power to destroy his brothers with a single legal filing? Jasper read the letter again by flashlight. What you do with what's there is your choice. I hope you choose better than I did. His father had left him a weapon, or a gift, or a test. Jasper gathered the documents carefully, replaced them in the metal box, and sat in the underground silence, thinking about choices and consequences and 30 years of questions he'd never gotten to ask. Jasper spent the night in his truck, parked beside the dusty corner with the metal document box on the seat beside him. He couldn't bring himself to leave it behind, but he also couldn't bring himself to drive back to town. Not yet. Not until he'd figured out what he was going to do. Sleep came in fragments. Each time he drifted off, he'd wake with a start, convinced he'd imagined the whole thing. Then he'd reach over and touch the box, feel its solid weight, and know it was real. By dawn, he'd made one decision. He needed verification. The documents looked legitimate, but he'd been fooled before by things that looked one way and turned out another. Before he did anything, before he even considered what to do, he needed to confirm that what he'd found was legally sound. The county clerk's office opened at 8. Jasper was there at 7:30, sitting in his truck in the parking lot, drinking gas station coffee and trying to organize his thoughts. He'd brought the box, but he'd left most of the documents in it. He'd only taken the 3 that seemed most crucial: the original deed from the government to Big Daddy Vance, the water rights certificate, and a survey map that showed the boundaries. Martha Hendricks had been the county clerk for 26 years. She was a woman in her mid-60s with reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and the kind of efficient manner that came from processing thousands of documents over decades. She knew everyone in the county and everyone's business, but she kept confidences like a priest kept confessions. "Jasper Vance," she said when he walked in. "I heard about your father. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Martha. What can I do for you?" He laid the deed on her counter. "I need to verify this document. Make sure it's properly recorded and still valid." Martha put on her glasses and studied the paper. Her expression didn't change, but Jasper saw her eyes move across the page twice, carefully. She looked up at him, then back down at the deed. "Where did you find this?" "In my father's effects. He left me the old Dusty Corner property. I remember when he bought that place." She tapped the deed. "But I don't remember ever seeing this. May I?" She took the document to her computer and began typing, searching through records. Jasper stood at the counter, trying to appear casual, while his heart hammered. Other people came and went. A young couple applying for a marriage license, an elderly man registering a vehicle. Normal morning business in a county office. Meanwhile, Jasper's entire future hung on whatever Martha was finding in those digital records. She returned after 20 minutes with a printout and the original deed. Her expression was carefully neutral. "The deed is valid and properly recorded. Filed November 3rd, 1991. The property description matches. The water rights assignment is also recorded, dated the same day." She paused. "Jasper, do you understand what this means?" "I'm starting to." "Your father never told your brothers about this?" "Apparently not." Martha removed her glasses and cleaned them on her shirt, a habit Jasper remembered from years of seeing her around town. "I'm not a lawyer," she said carefully, "and I'm not giving legal advice. But as county clerk, I can tell you that these documents supersede any subsequent property claims in the affected areas. The water rights particularly, those are absolutely clear. Without water rights, the affected parcels are legally unusable for ranching or agriculture. How much of the Vance Ranch does this affect?" She looked at her printout. "According to the survey, the government parcel, which your father purchased and which now belongs to you, surrounds approximately 70% of the current ranch property. The water rights include all 3 main springs and the primary aquifer access." Jasper's hands tightened on the counter edge. 70%. The core of the ranch, the good grazing land, the water that made the whole operation possible. "Martha, who else knows about these records?" "In this office?" "Just me now. They were filed before we digitized everything, so they're in the old microfiche archives. Nobody looks at those unless they're specifically searching for something from that era." She met his eyes. "But they're public records. Anyone could find them if they knew to look. Would they show up in a standard title search?" "They should, but—" She hesitated. "I've been doing this a long time, Jasper. I've seen title searches miss things, especially things filed during the transition from paper to digital. It's not common, but it happens. If your brother's attorney only searched the direct chain of title for the ranch property itself and didn't cross-reference with adjacent parcels or water rights filings, he might have missed this entirely." Jasper nodded slowly. That made sense. Big Daddy's attorney, Theodore Bramlett, had handled the estate, but the ranch had been in the family for 3 generations. The title would have seemed clear. Why would anyone think to search for government land transfers from 30 years ago? "Thank you, Martha." "Jasper." She waited until he looked at her. "Whatever you're planning to do with this information, think it through. This kind of thing, it's the sort of discovery that can tear families apart. My family was already torn apart. Even torn things can be mended, but some breaks, once made, can't be fixed." He took the documents and the printouts she'd made for him and walked out into the September morning. The air was clean and cool, the sky that particular blue you only get in high desert country. A beautiful day. The kind of day when everything seemed possible. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from a number he didn't recognize. Heard you inherited the dump. Want to sell? We'll pay cash. Ray Millison. Millison. Properties. Ray Millison, a local developer who bought distressed properties, sat on them until values rose, then flipped them. Jasper had worked on one of his renovation projects 3 years ago, demolition work at minimum wage. He deleted the text without responding. Another text came through, this one from a number he did recognize. Marcus. Family dinner, Sunday at the ranch. Mom wants everyone there. You're invited, but understand if you don't come. The typo was typical. Marcus. The man ran a multi-million-dollar cattle operation but couldn't spell to save his life. What wasn't typical was the invitation. Family dinners had stopped including Jasper years ago. He stared at the message for a long moment. Mom wants everyone there. His mother, Catherine Vance, who'd been caught in the middle of whatever feud had grown between Big Daddy and his youngest son, who'd tried to mediate, to explain, to maintain connections that her husband seemed determined to sever. She was 78 now, and the funeral had been hard on her. Jasper typed back, "I'll be there." The response came immediately. "Good, bring beer." He almost smiled at that. Some things never changed. The Vance men might be at war, but they still expected you to show up with beer. Jasper drove to the library and spent 4 hours in front of a computer researching water rights law in Texas. What he learned was both enlightening and troubling. Water rights were treated almost as seriously as land ownership in this part of the country. They could be bought, sold, traded, or withheld, and without them, land was essentially worthless for any agricultural purpose. Texas law was clear. Prior appropriation ruled. First in time, first in right. The government's acquisition of the water rights in 1962 had been properly recorded. Big Daddy's purchase of those rights in 1991 had been equally proper. The rights were now Jasper's, legally and completely, which meant he had a choice to make before Sunday dinner. He could say nothing. Keep the secret his father had kept. Let his brothers continue running the ranch, never knowing how precarious their position truly was. Eventually, when he died, the truth would come out, but that might be decades from now. Or he could tell them. Lay the documents on the Sunday dinner table and watch their world collapse. Or he could do something in between. Some middle path his father might have envisioned when he set up this elaborate test. I hope you choose better than I did. What had his father chosen? What mistake had Big Daddy made that he wanted Jasper to avoid? Jasper drove back to the dusty corner as the afternoon light began to slant golden across the desert. He descended into the bunker again, this time with better lights. He'd stopped at the hardware store and bought a battery-powered lantern. In the records room, he began searching through the filing cabinets, looking for anything that might explain his father's thinking. Receipts, correspondence, notes, anything that would tell him why Big Daddy had kept this secret for 30 years. He found the journal in the bottom drawer of the desk, wrapped in oilcloth and sealed in a plastic bag. A simple composition book, the kind schoolchildren used, with a black and white marbled cover. His father's handwriting filled the pages in pencil, neat and precise. The first entry was dated September 1991. Bought the old listening post today. Government was practically giving it away. Nobody else bid. Probably nobody else even knew it existed. The paperwork is complicated, but the attorney says it's solid. I now control the water under most of my own ranch. The boys don't need to know. Might be best if they never do. Jasper sat in the glow of the lantern and read. The entries were sporadic. Months would pass between them, sometimes years. But they painted a picture he'd never seen before. November 1991. Marcus asked me today where I'd been spending time. Told him I was checking fence on the east section. Hated lying to him, but what would I say? That I've been driving out to an abandoned gas station to sit in a Cold War bunker and think about the future? He'd think I'd lost my mind. June 1993. Garrett's getting married next month. Good girl, Amy. Level-headed. She'll keep him grounded. I should be happy, but all I can think about is what happens after I'm gone. The boys will fight over the ranch. They're already jockeying for position, each one trying to prove he's the better rancher, the worthier son. Marcus with his expansion plans. Garrett with his breeding program. Both of them looking to me for approval. Both of them convinced the ranch should be theirs alone. I bought the water rights thinking it would give me leverage, a way to force them to work together. Now I'm not sure. Might be I've just given them something else to fight over. March 1997. Jasper's 15 today. Caught him reading again instead of working. Marcus rode him hard for it. Called him lazy. I should have stepped in, but I didn't. The truth is, the boy makes me nervous. He asks too many questions. Sees too much. Yesterday he asked me why we leased the east section instead of buying it outright. Had to make up some story about cash flow. The real reason is that section sits on what used to be government land, and the water rights are tangled up with the listening post. But I can't tell him that. Can't tell any of them. Jasper's hands tightened on the journal. He remembered that birthday. Remembered Marcus yelling at him for sitting under a tree with a book instead of helping move cattle. Remembered his father's silence, which had felt like agreement with Marcus's criticism. August 2003, Jasper left today. Packed his truck and drove away without a word to me. Catherine cried. Marcus said good riddance. Garrett looked relieved. I stood at the window and watched him go and couldn't find words to call him back. Should have told him the truth years ago. Should have explained that I've been harder on him because he reminds me too much of myself at that age. Questioning everything, never satisfied with simple answers. I pushed him away thinking I was protecting him from his own nature. Now he's gone, and I don't know if he'll ever come back. The entries grew darker after that. December 2008. Saw Jasper in town today at the feed store. He's working for the Hendersons now, day labor. Looks thin. I wanted to go to him, but what would I say? He looked right through me like I was a stranger. Maybe I am. Maybe I made myself into a stranger to my own son because I was too proud or too stubborn or too afraid to admit I was wrong. April 2012. Marcus and Garrett came to me with plans to buy the Henderson place. Good land, but the price is steep. They want to take out a loan against the ranch. I told them no without explaining why. Can't take out a loan when you don't truly control the collateral. They were angry. Called me a stubborn old fool. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should just tell them about the water rights and be done with it. But every time I think about it, I imagine the look on their faces when they realize their inheritance isn't what they thought. Imagine the fights, the lawyers, the family torn apart even worse than it already is. May 2019. Doctor says my heart's getting weak. Gave me pills and warnings. I'm 80 years old. Can't expect the machine to run forever. Need to make a decision about the listening post, about the water rights, about all of it. Been carrying this secret for 28 years. It's gotten heavy. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before Big Daddy died. Talked to Theodore Bramlett today about the will. Told him I'm leaving the ranch to Marcus and Garrett. The listening post to Jasper. He asked if I was sure. Asked if the boys knew about the water rights situation. I said they didn't need to know unless Jasper decided to tell them. Theodore thinks I'm making a mistake. Maybe I am. But here's what I've figured out after 3 decades of thinking about it. Marcus and Garrett are ranchers. They'll fight for that land because it's all they know, all they want. Jasper's different. Always has been. He thinks about things in ways they don't. Sees angles and possibilities. If anyone can figure out a solution that doesn't destroy the family completely, it's him. I'm not leaving him a burden. I'm leaving him a choice. And maybe, if I'm lucky, I'm leaving him a reason to come back. Not for me, I'll be dead, but for his mother, for his brothers, even if they don't deserve it, for the land itself. I've spent 30 years trying to protect my sons from each other and from themselves. Now I'm out of time. All I can do is trust that Jasper will choose better than I did, better than I could. Jasper closed the journal and sat in the underground silence. The lantern threw shadows on the concrete walls. Above him, the desert night pressed down on the ruins of the dusty corner. His father hadn't been testing him, or punishing him, or playing games. Big Daddy had been asking for help. All those years of distance, of coldness, of seeming rejection, they hadn't been about Jasper not being good enough. They'd been about Big Daddy being trapped in a situation of his own making. He'd bought the water rights thinking they'd give him control, leverage, security. Instead, they'd become a secret that isolated him from his own sons, a weight that grew heavier. Every year, he carried it alone. And now that weight was Jasper's. He thought about Sunday dinner, about sitting at the family table with his brothers and their wives and his mother, all of them pretending that things were normal, that the family wasn't broken, that Big Daddy's death hadn't left a crater in the center of their lives. He could drop the documents on the table right there. Watch Marcus's face go white as he realized what they meant. See Garrett's hands shake as he calculated what they'd just lost. It would be justice, in a way. Payback for every slight, every dismissal, every time they'd treated him like he didn't matter. But his father's words echoed in his mind. I hope you choose better than I did. Big Daddy had chosen silence, had chosen to carry the burden alone rather than risk the family tearing itself apart, and that choice had poisoned 30 years of his life, had driven away the son who might have understood, had trapped him in a cage of his own construction. Jasper wouldn't choose silence, but he wouldn't choose destruction either. There had to be a third option. Something his father hadn't seen or hadn't been brave enough to attempt. He just had to figure out what it was before Sunday dinner. Jasper gathered the journal and the documents and climbed back up to the surface. The night air was cold and clean. Stars filled the sky from horizon to horizon, the way they only did in places far from city lights. He locked the steel door, hung the sledgehammer back in his truck bed, and drove toward town with the metal box on the seat beside him. He had 3 days to find an answer. Jasper spent Friday morning at the county law library, reading cases about water rights disputes. The more he read, the clearer the situation became, and the worse it looked for his brothers. In Texas, water rights could be severed from surface rights. They could be sold separately, inherited separately, and most importantly, enforced separately. If Jasper wanted to, he could shut off access to the springs and wells that fed the Vance ranch. He could do it legally, immediately, and his brothers would have no recourse except to negotiate with him or abandon the ranch entirely. The thought made him physically ill. By noon, he'd had enough of legal language and worst-case scenarios. He drove to his mother's house, a small place in town that she'd moved to 5 years ago when Big Daddy's stubbornness about ranch life had finally worn her down. She'd wanted him to move with her, but the old man had refused. Ranchers died on their land, he'd said. That was how it was supposed to be. Catherine Vance answered the door in a flour-dusted apron, her silver hair pulled back in the same simple bun she'd worn for 40 years. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she'd raised 3 sons and managed a ranch household for 5 decades. There was steel in her, even if it was wrapped in softness. "Jasper," she said, and pulled him into a hug before he could speak. She smelled like bread and lavender. "Come in. I'm making cinnamon rolls." The kitchen was warm and bright, exactly the opposite of the underground bunker where he'd spent so much time in the past 2 days. His mother moved around the space with practiced efficiency, checking the oven, rolling out dough, talking in that gentle, constant stream she'd perfected over years of trying to fill silences in a house full of uncommunicative men. "I'm glad you're coming to Sunday dinner," she said. "Your brothers, well, I know things have been hard, but family is family. Your father's gone now, and we need to stick together." "Mom." Jasper sat at the kitchen table, in the same chair he'd sat in as a child when he'd come to her with scraped knees or hurt feelings or questions his father wouldn't answer. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey." "Did Dad ever talk to you about why he was so hard on me?" Catherine's hands stilled in the dough. She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was careful. "Your father loved you, Jasper. I hope you know that." "That's not what I asked." She sighed and came to sit across from him, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. "He was scared of you," she said finally. "Scared for you, really? You were always different from your brothers. Smarter in some ways, or at least smart in different ways. You asked questions they never thought to ask. You saw patterns they didn't see, and that terrified him. Why? Because he thought the world would eat you alive. Marcus and Garrett, they fit. They understood the rules and followed them. They knew their place and were content in it. But you," she reached across and took his hand, "you were never content, never satisfied with simple answers. Your father thought that would bring you pain. So he tried to toughen you up, make you hard enough to survive what he was sure was coming. He pushed me away. He did, and I told him 1,000 times it was wrong. Told him he was losing you, but your father was a stubborn man. Once he set himself on a path, he didn't know how to get off it." She squeezed his hand. "These last few years, he regretted it. I know he did. He'd sit at the window sometimes, just staring out at nothing, and I knew he was thinking about you." Jasper felt something tighten in his chest. "He left me the dusty corner. I know. Marcus and Garrett think it was an insult, but I wondered—" She stopped. studying his face. "There's more to it, isn't there?" He'd never been able to lie to his mother. "Yeah," he said. "There's more. Something important, very important. Something that affects the whole family." Catherine nodded slowly. "Your father was a complicated man. He kept things close, even from me sometimes, especially these last years." She stood and returned to her dough, working it with strong, practiced hands. "Whatever he left you, Jasper, whatever burden or gift or test it is, I trust you to handle it right. You've got your father's intelligence and, I hope, a better heart. What if handling it right means hurting Marcus and Garrett? Hurt comes in different forms. Sometimes the kindest thing is the thing that feels cruel at first." She shaped the dough into rolls, placing them carefully in a greased pan. "Your brothers, they think they know everything, think they've got life figured out because they followed the path your father set for them. Maybe they need to learn they don't know as much as they think. Or maybe they just need their brother to not make their lives harder than they already are. Is that what you think you'd be doing? Making their lives harder?" Jasper thought about the documents in his truck, about 70% of the ranch sitting on land his brothers didn't control, about water rights they didn't own, about a legal situation so precarious that one filing with the county could collapse their entire operation. "I don't know what I'd be doing," he admitted. "That's the problem." His mother slid the pan into the oven and set the timer. Then she came back to the table and sat down again, looking at him with those clear blue eyes that had seen through every lie and evasion he'd ever attempted. "Let me tell you something about your brothers," she said. "They're good men, hard-working, honest, loyal, but they've been handed everything. The ranch, the respect, your father's approval. All of it came to them because they were the oldest, because they fit the mold, because they never questioned. They've never had to struggle for anything that mattered. Never had to prove themselves when the odds were against them. So I should make them struggle? That's the lesson. I'm saying that sometimes people need to be challenged to find out who they really are. Your father never challenged them because he was so afraid of conflict, so afraid of the family breaking apart. But families that never face conflict don't grow stronger. They just grow more fragile. One good shake and they shatter completely." Jasper thought about that. Thought about 30 years of secrets and silence and his father's fear of confrontation. Thought about his brothers laughing as they inherited a ranch that wasn't as secure as they believed. What if I tell them something they don't want to hear? Something that changes everything? Then you tell them. And you give them the chance to rise to it or fall. But either way, you'll know the truth of who they are, and they'll know the truth of who you are. The timer dinged. Catherine rose and pulled the cinnamon rolls from the oven, filling the kitchen with sweetness and warmth. She set them on the counter to cool, then turned back to him. "Your father spent 3 decades trying to protect everyone from hard truths. Look where it got him. Died with secrets, died with regrets, died with one son who wouldn't talk to him." She came and kissed the top of his head, the way she'd done when he was small. "Don't make his mistakes, honey. Whatever truth you've found, whatever choice you've got to make, trust yourself to make it, and trust your brothers to handle it, even if they surprise you." Jasper stayed for lunch, helped her clean the kitchen, and left with a dozen cinnamon rolls wrapped in foil. As he drove back through town, past the feed store where he'd seen his father that last time, past the attorney's office where the will had been read, he realized something his mother had known all along. The burden Big Daddy had carried all those years wasn't the secret itself. It was the fear of what the secret would do to his family if revealed. That fear had trapped him, isolated him, turned him into a harder, colder version of himself. Jasper wouldn't let that happen, wouldn't let fear make his choices. He had 2 days until Sunday dinner, 2 days to decide how to tell the truth. Saturday morning brought rain, unusual for September, but welcome. Jasper stood on the porch of his rented room above the feed store and watched water darken the street, smelled that particular scent of desert earth receiving moisture. Good rain, the kind ranchers prayed for. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Sunday dinner pushed to 4 p.m. Mom wants the rain to clear first. Still bring beer. Jasper typed back. Will do. Another message came through almost immediately, this one from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Vance, this is Patricia Chen from the county assessor's office. I need to speak with you about a property matter. Please call at your earliest convenience. He stared at the message, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. The assessor's office. That couldn't be coincidence. Someone had been looking at records. Someone had started asking questions about the dusty corner and what might lie beneath it. He called the number. Patricia Chen answered on the second ring. She had a professional voice, neither warm nor cold. "Mr. Vance, thank you for calling back so quickly. I have some questions about the property at 14250 Old Highway 54, the dusty corner." "Yes, we're conducting a routine assessment update for properties in that tax zone, and we've found some irregularities in the filing. The property appears to include structures that aren't reflected in the current assessment. Underground structures, specifically. I only just inherited the property, I understand. But as the current owner, you're responsible for ensuring accurate assessment records. Can you confirm whether there are in fact underground structures on the property?" Jasper chose his words carefully. "There's a basement level. I'm still evaluating what's there." "I see. Mr. Vance, if the structures are substantial, if they significantly increase the property's value, we'll need to reassess for tax purposes. I'd like to schedule a site inspection next week. Would Tuesday work for you? I'll need to check my schedule." "Of course. But please be aware that the county has a legal right to inspect properties for assessment purposes. If you decline a scheduled inspection, we can obtain a court order." "I'm not declining. I just need a few days to get things organized." "I understand. I'll send you a formal notice via email. We'll plan on Tuesday at 10 a.m. unless I hear otherwise." She hung up. Jasper stood on the porch, rain falling around him, his mind racing. Someone had tipped off the assessor's office. Someone knew about the bunker, or suspected it existed. Who? The only people he'd told were Martha Hendricks at the county clerk's office. And she wouldn't have said anything. She'd warned him to be careful, had treated the discovery with the gravity it deserved. Unless someone had been watching him, had seen him coming and going from the dusty corner, had wondered what he was doing there, had started asking questions. His phone rang. This time it was Ray Millison, the property developer who'd texted earlier. "Jasper Vance, Ray Millison. We met a few years back when you worked on the Carter Street renovation." "I remember." Good. "Listen, I heard you inherited that old gas station out on 54. I know it seems like a piece of junk, but I've got a client who's interested in properties along that corridor. Interstate access projects in the planning stages. Could be that dead highway gets a lot more traffic in 5 years. I'm prepared to offer you $60,000 cash, closing in 2 weeks. $60,000. Nearly 50% more than the assessed value Martha had mentioned. And Millison wanted to close fast. "That's generous," Jasper said carefully. "But I'm not looking to sell right now." I understand. New inheritance, lots to think about. But let me be straight with you. My client is motivated. If you're worried about the tax burden or the assessment issues, selling now might be your best move. Clean exit, cash in hand, no complications. Assessment issues? A pause. "Well, I heard the county might be taking a closer look at the property. Reassessment can be expensive, especially if they decide the property's worth more than currently listed. Just something to think about." Jasper's jaw tightened. "How did you hear about the county's interest?" "Oh, you know how it is in a small county. People talk. No secrets in a town this size." "Right. Thanks for the offer, Ray, but I'm not selling." "Your call. But if you change your mind or if things get complicated, you've got my number. Offer stands for the next 30 days. He hung up. Jasper stood in the rain, pieces clicking together in his mind. Millison had known about the assessment review before Patricia Chen had called. That meant he had someone in the assessor's office or in the county clerk's office, or both. Probably paid for tips about properties coming up for reassessment or tax sale, which meant Millison suspected, or knew, that the dusty corner was worth more than its current listing. Much more. Jasper went inside, dried off, and drove to the one place he could think to get honest advice. The law office of Sarah Mitchell, 3 blocks off Main Street. Sarah was 46, practiced small-town law, and had a reputation for straight talk. Jasper had helped her move into her office 5 years ago, and they'd stayed friendly in the casual way people do in small communities. She saw him through her window and waved him in out of the rain. "Jasper Vance. I heard about your father. My condolences." "Thank you. Sarah, I need to hire you." She raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For advice on a complicated property situation. Confidential. Take a seat." He laid out the situation as carefully as he could. The inheritance, the bunker, the water rights. the documents showing his control over land his brothers thought they owned. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious as he talked. When he finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. "Jasper, this is potentially explosive. I know. Your brothers have no idea. None. And you're thinking about telling them tomorrow at a family dinner. I'm thinking I need to tell them soon, before someone else figures it out and it becomes public." Sarah tapped her pen against her desk, thinking. "Here's what I can tell you from a legal standpoint. The documents you have, if they're legitimate, and it sounds like they are, give you absolute control over water rights that are essential to your brother's ranching operation. In Texas, that's as good as owning the land itself. Better, in some ways. Can they contest it? They can try. They can claim undue influence, mental incompetence on your father's part, fraud, but none of that will stick if the documents are properly executed and recorded, which they are. So I'm within my rights to enforce the water rights, to restrict their access if I wanted to. Legally, yes. But Jasper," she leaned forward, "this isn't really a legal question, is it? It's a family question, and I can't advise you on that. I'm not trying to destroy my brothers. I believe you, but they might not see it that way when you tell them they've been ranching on land they don't control, that their inheritance isn't what they thought, that their younger brother, the one they've dismissed and mocked, holds all the cards. So what do? That depends on what you want. Do you want ownership of the ranch? Do you want payment for the water rights? Do you want an apology? Acknowledgement? What's the end game?" Jasper realized he didn't have an answer. He'd been so focused on understanding what he had and what it meant that he hadn't thought about what he actually wanted to do with it. He stopped. "I want them to understand that our father wasn't the man they thought he was, and that I'm not the failure they think I am. Then you need to approach this carefully, not as a weapon, not as revenge, but as information that requires all of you to figure out a new arrangement, as adults, as brothers. They won't want a new arrangement. They'll want things to stay exactly as they are. Maybe, but they don't get that choice anymore. Your father made sure of that when he split the inheritance the way he did." Sarah pulled out a notepad. "Let me draft a proposal, something that outlines the situation, acknowledges everyone's interests, and suggests a path forward. You can present it tomorrow as a starting point for discussion rather than an ultimatum." "What kind of proposal?" "A partnership agreement. You lease them the water rights at a fair rate. Everyone shares in the ranch's success. You get a seat at the table, a voice in decisions. They get security and continuity. It's not perfect, but it's better than a court battle." Jasper thought about it. A partnership. Working with his brothers instead of against them. It was more than he'd had in 15 years. But would they accept it? Would they see it as fair? Or as their little brother trying to buy his way into something he hadn't earned? "Draft it," he said. "I'll look at it before tomorrow. This is going to be hard, Jasper. Be prepared for anger. They're going to feel betrayed, even though you're not the one who set this up." "I know." He left Sarah's office as the rain tapered off, the sky beginning to clear from the west. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, his family would gather for dinner, and everything would change. Sarah called him at 8 that evening. "I've got the proposal drafted. Can you come by and review it on Saturday night? I want you to have time to think about it before tomorrow. This is too important to rush." He drove back to her office. She'd stayed late. Had the document ready, printed and bound. 6 pages outlining a partnership structure that seemed fair on paper. Jasper would provide the water rights. Marcus and Garrett would provide the land, livestock, and operational expertise. Profits would be split 3 ways. All major decisions would require unanimous agreement. "It's generous to them," Sarah said. "You're giving up a lot of leverage for equal partnership in an operation they've been running for decades. That's the point. I don't want to lord it over them. I want to work together. Read it tonight. Sleep on it. If you still feel good about it tomorrow, present it at dinner." She handed him a folder. "I've also included a legal summary of your rights and their options if they refuse. Just so you're prepared." Jasper drove back to the dusty corner as darkness fell. He'd been spending more time there than at his rented room, drawn back repeatedly to the bunker, to the place where his father had kept his secrets. He unlocked the steel door and descended with his lantern, the proposal folder under his arm. The bunker felt different tonight. Or maybe he felt different, knowing that tomorrow everything would change. He sat at the desk in the records room and read Sarah's proposal twice, making notes in the margins, thinking through how his brothers might react. As he set the folder aside, his elbow knocked against one of the desk drawers. It slid open. He'd been through these drawers before, had thought he'd found everything, but this time the drawer stuck part way out. Something was jamming it from behind. Jasper pulled harder. The drawer came free, and with it, a small metal box that had been attached to the drawer's back panel with magnets. It fell to the floor with a heavy thunk. The box was locked, but it was a simple combination lock. Jasper stared at it, his heart beginning to race. What else had his father hidden? What hadn't he found yet? He tried his birthday. Nothing. His mother's birthday. His father's. Nothing. Then, on impulse, he tried the numbers from the brass key. 007, just 7, repeat it 3 times. 07, 07, 07. The lock clicked open. Inside were 2 items, a cassette tape in a clear case, labeled only with a date from last month, and a sealed envelope marked, "Open if the tape doesn't explain enough." Jasper stared at them. His father had made a recording, recently, after he'd known his heart was failing. This was a message meant to be found, meant to be heard. The bunker had a cassette player, probably original equipment from when the facility was active. Jasper found it on a shelf, plugged it in, and slid the tape into the slot. The motor whirred. Then his father's voice filled the room, strong and clear, exactly as Jasper remembered it. "If you're hearing this, Jasper, then you found the bunker, found the documents, and you're probably angry, probably confused about why I set things up this way. I don't blame you. Hell, I'm confused myself, and I'm the one who did it." A pause. The sound of his father shifting in a chair, clearing his throat. "There are things you need to know. Things I should have told you years ago, but couldn't. Some because of promises I made. Some because I was a coward. Mostly the latter, if I'm honest." Another pause. When Big Daddy's voice came back, it was quieter, more careful. "The water rights situation. It's not as simple as the documents make it look. Yes, I bought the government land. Yes, I control the water. But there's a detail the paperwork doesn't show. The government sale had a condition. A verbal condition that was never written down but was absolute nonetheless." Jasper leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. The land had to stay in family hands. Not necessarily my family. Any family would do. But it couldn't be broken up. Couldn't be sold to developers or corporations. The government wanted assurance that if their old installations were ever needed again, if tensions with Russia flared up or if another Cold War started, they could reclaim the property quickly. They needed a single owner they could negotiate with, not 100 different parcels owned by strangers. The tape hissed quietly. Big Daddy's voice continued. I agreed. Signed nothing, but gave my word. And my word was good enough for them because, and here's the part you really need to know, I wasn't just a rancher buying cheap land. I was an asset, a cooperating individual. That's what they called it. Jasper's breath caught. Back in the 60s, I did some work for the government. Nothing glamorous. Mostly, I let them know when strangers showed up asking questions about military installations or when I spotted survey crews where they shouldn't be. This was border country, remember? Lots of folks thought the Soviets had agents everywhere, looking for weak points. I was one of dozens of ranchers who kept eyes open and mouths shut. The listening post was a bonus. They offered it to me first, before public sale, because I'd been reliable. Because they trusted me to maintain the secrecy and report anything unusual. I took it, figured it was smart business. Control the water, control the land. Didn't think about the consequences. Didn't think about how keeping that secret would poison everything else in my life. Another long pause. When Big Daddy spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. Here's what I never told anyone. There's a second set of documents, a sealed federal file that proves the original sale was conditional. If you try to sell the land to anyone outside the family, the government can reclaim it, not for the purchase price I paid, for fair market value at the time of original sale. $2,000. The current owner gets nothing. Jasper felt his stomach drop. I kept that clause secret because I didn't want Marcus and Garrett pressuring me to sell when land values went up. Didn't want them fighting over whether to cash out or keep ranching. But it means the Dusty Corner property, the bunker, the water rights, all of it, can't be sold, can only be inherited or transferred within the family. That developer calling you, the one offering big money, if you accept, The government will void the sale within 30 days. You'll lose everything. The tape spun on. Big Daddy's breathing was audible now. Labored. I left the ranch to your brothers because they'll fight to keep it. Left the water rights to you because you're smart enough to figure out how to make this work for everyone. But you can't do it alone, son. You need them, and they need you, whether they know it or not. The land has to stay. In the family. Those are the rules I agreed to 50 years ago, and I'm holding you to them now. I know it's not fair. I know I've left you a burden instead of a gift. But here's the truth. You're the only one of my sons I trust to see beyond his own interests. Marcus wants the ranch because it makes him feel powerful. Garrett wants it because it's all he knows. But you've always asked different questions. Always looked for the why behind the what. That's what this situation needs. Someone willing to think past the obvious answers. The recording ended there, cutting off mid-breath as if Big Daddy had simply stopped talking and turned off the machine. The silence that followed was absolute. Jasper sat in the bunker's artificial light and tried to process what he'd just heard. His father hadn't just left him a complicated inheritance. He'd left him a legal trap. The water rights couldn't be sold. The land couldn't be sold. The only option was keeping everything in the family, which meant working with Marcus and Garrett wasn't just desirable. It was mandatory, and his brothers didn't know any of this. Wouldn't know unless he told them. Would probably spend tomorrow's dinner resenting him for having any claim at all on their ranch. He opened the second envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a phone number and a name. Colonel James Patterson, U.S. Army, Rete. Below it, in his father's handwriting, call him if you need verification. Tell him Dusty 7. He'll confirm everything. Jasper looked at his watch. 9:30 on a Saturday night. Too late to call a stranger, even one his father had vouched for. But tomorrow morning, before the family dinner, he would make that call, would verify that his father's story was true. Because if it was, if the water rights really couldn't be sold, if the land had to stay in family hands, then the proposal Sarah had drafted was worthless. He couldn't offer his brothers a clean partnership where everyone had options. He could only offer them the truth. They were all trapped together by a decision Big Daddy had made 50 years ago. The only question was whether that truth would bring them together or tear them apart completely. Jasper gathered the tape, the envelope, and Sarah's proposal. He climbed back to the surface and locked the bunker behind him. The desert night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead. Somewhere out there, his brothers were going about their evening, confident in their inheritance, secure in their plans. Tomorrow, he would take all of that away, not because he wanted to, but because his father had left him no choice. He sat in his truck for a long time, staring at the ruined gas station that had turned out to be so much more than it appeared. Just like him, he supposed. Just like his father. Just like this whole complicated, impossible situation. At midnight, he drove back to town, Sarah's proposal on the seat beside him, and his father's voice still echoing in his mind. You're the only one I trust to see beyond his own interests. He hoped to God his father had been right. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that follows good rain. Jasper woke at dawn in his rented room, his father's cassette tape still playing through his mind on an endless loop. He made coffee, showered, and at 7 o'clock, hoping it wasn't too early for a Sunday, he dialed Colonel James Patterson's number. The phone rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. Patterson, Colonel Patterson, my name is Jasper Vance. My father was... Big Daddy Vance, I know who you were. Been expecting your call for about 3 weeks now. Figured you'd find the tape eventually. Jasper sat down on his narrow bed. You knew he recorded it. Hell, I suggested it. Your dad called me last month. Said he was getting his affairs in order. Wanted to know what he could and couldn't tell you about the arrangement. I told him he could tell you everything. The operational security period expired 20 years ago. But he wanted it documented. Wanted me to be available if you had questions. I have questions. I imagine you do. What do you want to know? Was he telling the truth? About the sale conditions? About the land having to stay in the family? Patterson was quiet for a moment. Son, your father was one of the most reliable men I ever worked with. 30 years I knew him. He never once gave me reason to doubt his word. If he told you the land has to stay in family hands, that's the God's honest truth. But there's nothing in writing. Correct. The condition was verbal, sealed with a handshake and an understanding. That was how things worked back then, especially with matters of national security. We couldn't put certain conditions in public documents because that would raise questions we didn't want to answer. So how do I prove it? If my brothers contest the restriction, you call me, I testify. I've got records. Classified records, yes, but I can get them declassified for legal proceedings if necessary. Notes from meetings. Memoranda. Documentation of your father's cooperation with our intelligence efforts. It would take a few months, but I can prove the sale was conditional. Jasper pressed his forehead into his free hand. What happens if I try to sell anyway? If I ignore the restriction, the government reacquires the property. Department of Defense has a standing claim filed with the county. Been there since 1991. It's buried in old records, but it's valid. If you sell to anyone outside immediate family, DOD exercises that claim within 90 days. You get nothing. Buyer gets nothing. Property reverts to federal ownership at the original sale price, $2,000. That's right. Your father knew that. Counted on it to keep the land secure. Figured you and your brothers would be incentivized to work together rather than lose everything. He had a strange way of bringing a family together. Patterson chuckled, a dry sound. Your father was a complicated man, smart, loyal, but stubborn as hell. We had some long conversations over the years. He talked about you boys sometimes, worried about leaving you in a bad situation, but he believed, genuinely believed, that you were the only one who could thread the needle. Make it work, despite the restrictions. Why me? Because you left. Because you saw the ranch from the outside. Because you didn't have your whole identity wrapped up in being a Vance heir. He thought that gave you perspective your brothers don't have. Patterson paused. Look, Jasper, I don't know your family dynamics, but I knew your father. He wouldn't have set this up if he didn't think you could handle it. And he wouldn't have trusted you with it if he didn't believe you'd do right by everyone involved. They talked for another 20 minutes. Patterson gave him details about the original government purchases, about the network of listening posts that had stretched across 3 states, about the gradual decommissioning as satellite technology made ground-based installations obsolete. He confirmed that there were no other hidden conditions, no other surprises waiting in the bureaucratic shadows. One more thing, Patterson said before hanging up. Your father asked me to tell you something if you called. He said, and I'm quoting her, "Tell Jasper, I'm sorry I didn't say this when I was alive. I was proud of him for leaving. Took courage I didn't have." The line went silent. Jasper sat with the phone in his hand, his father's posthumous words settling into a place in his chest that had been empty for 15 years. At 9 o'clock, he drove to Sarah Mitchell's office. She met him at the door, already dressed for her own Sunday plans. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "Found another recording from my father. There's a complication." He played her the tape, watched her expression shift from confusion to concern, to something like sympathy. When it finished, she sat back in her desk chair and removed her glasses. "So the partnership proposal is moot," she said, "unless I can convince my brothers that working together is their only option. And if they refuse, if they'd rather let the government take it all than share with you," Jasper had thought about that through the long, sleepless hours, "then I let them make that choice. But at least they'll make it with full information, full understanding of what's at stake." Sarah nodded slowly. "You're a better man than most in your position would be. A lot of people would use this as leverage, force their brothers into an unfair deal because the alternative is losing everything. I thought about it, but that's not what my father wanted. And it's not who I want to be. What do you want, Jasper? Really?" He thought about the question. About 15 years of working other people's ranches for day wages. About watching his brothers build the life he'd walked away from. About his father's letter. "You were always different, always asking questions. I want to belong somewhere," he said quietly. "I want my brothers to see me as something other than the kid who couldn't cut it. He stopped, surprised by the emotion rising in his throat. "I want to go home, even if home looks different than it used to." Sarah reached across and squeezed his hand. "Then tell them that. Not the legal details first. Not the threats or the leverage. Tell them what you just told me, that you want to come home, that you want to find a way to make this work for everyone. Everything else is just details to work out." They're going to be angry. Of course they are, but anger passes. What matters is what comes after the anger, whether you all choose to work through it or let it drive you apart completely. Jasper left her office with a clearer sense of how the afternoon would unfold. He'd tell his brothers the truth, all of it, and then he'd give them space to react, to be angry, to process what it meant for their futures. At noon, he stopped by his mother's house. She was preparing food to bring to the ranch. Her famous potato salad, fresh rolls, a peach cobbler. She looked up as he entered the kitchen, studied his face, and immediately knew something had changed. "You're going to tell them today," she said. "I have to. It can't wait any longer. Are you ready?" "No, but I don't think I'll ever be ready." "So today is as good as any day." His mother wiped her hands and came to him, reached up to cup his face in her small, strong hands. "Your father believed in you. I believe in you. Whatever happens today, remember that. What if they hate me? They're your brothers. They might be angry. They might say things they don't mean. But hate? No. You can't hate someone you've known your whole life. Not really. Not in the deep places where family lives. You have more faith than I do. I've lived longer, seen more. Families survive worse than this." She kissed his cheek. "Now help me load this food in the car. And remember, no matter what happens, you come back here tonight. My door's always open to you." The drive to the ranch took 40 minutes. Jasper followed his mother's car, both of them traveling the familiar roads that wound through high desert country. The land looked good after the rain, greener than it had been, the sage fresh and fragrant. Cattle grazed in the distance, black dots against golden grass. This was his father's legacy. 43,000 acres of it. 3 generations of Vance blood and sweat soaked into this ground. And now it all hung in a balance that depended on what happened in the next few hours. They arrived at 3:30. Marcus and Garrett were already there, their trucks parked near the house. Jasper helped his mother carry food inside, nodding to his brothers but not speaking. Not yet. There would be time for talk once. They were all seated. The ranch house was the same as he remembered. Rough-hewn beams, wide plank floors, windows that looked out over the valley. His father's chair still sat by the fireplace, empty now. His boots were still by the door, worn leather spotted with mud from his last ride. Marcus was at the stove, grilling steaks. Garrett was setting the table. Their wives were in the living room with the grandchildren, 3 kids between them, ranging from 5 to 12. Normal family chaos. Normal Sunday dinner preparation. Except nothing about today was normal. At 4 o'clock, they sat down to eat. His mother said grace, her voice steady and clear. They passed food, made small talk about the rain, about cattle prices, about one of Garrett's cows that had won a ribbon at the county fair. Jasper barely tasted his food. He watched his brothers, watched them eat and laugh and interact with their families, and he thought about what he was about to do, how the next hour would change everything. His mother met his eyes across the table. She gave him a small nod. It was time. "Marcus, Garrett," Jasper said, setting down his fork. "I need to talk to you both. About the inheritance, about the dusty corner. There are some things you need to know." His brothers exchanged glances. Marcus wiped his mouth with his napkin. "Okay, what about it?" Jasper reached into the folder beside his chair and pulled out the documents. The deeds, the water rights certificates, the survey maps, his father's letter. He laid them on the table between the dinner plates and the serving dishes. "The dusty corner isn't what it looks like," he began, "and neither is the ranch." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stared at the documents spread across the table. Garrett had gone pale, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Their wives looked confused, not yet understanding what they were seeing. "What is this?" Marcus finally said, his voice carefully controlled. Jasper took a breath. In 1962, the federal government bought 48,000 acres of land in this county. They used it for Cold War listening posts. When the posts were decommissioned in 1991, Dad bought one of them, the Dusty Corner, but he also bought all the land surrounding it, and all the water rights. That's not possible," Garrett said. "We've been ranching this land for 3 generations. It's ours. The surface rights are yours, but the water rights, the springs, the wells, the aquifer access, those belong to whoever owns the old government parcel, which is now me." Marcus pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is bullshit. Dad would never, he wouldn't do that to us. He did it to protect you, and to protect the land." Jasper pulled out his father's letter, the one from the will and the journal entries. "Read these, all of it." He explained why. Marcus snatched the papers. His hands shaking, Garrett leaned over to read with him. Jasper watched his brothers' faces as they processed what their father had written. Watched denial turn to confusion, confusion to comprehension, comprehension to anger. 30 years, Marcus said, his voice rising. He kept this secret for 30 goddamn years. Let us build our whole lives around this ranch. Let us plan our futures, and all of it was built on a lie. It wasn't a lie, Jasper said. The ranch is real. Your work is real. Everything you've built is real. The only thing that's changed is that you need to acknowledge I'm part of it now. Garrett stood up, pacing to the window. Part of it. You've been gone 15 years. 15 years of us working this land every day while you... What? Worked day labor for other people. Lived in a room above a feed store. And now you show up with some documents and expect what, exactly? A partnership? That's exactly what I expect. What I'm offering. Offering? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're not offering us anything. You're holding a gun to our heads. Give you a share or lose the water rights. That's extortion. It's reality. A reality Dad created. Then Dad was wrong. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. He was wrong to buy that land, wrong to keep it secret, wrong to put us in this position. Their mother's voice cut through the tension. Marcus, that's enough. Mom, you can't be okay with this. Catherine Vance stood, small but commanding. I'm not okay with any of it. Not with your father's secrets. Not with the way you're talking to your brother. Not with this family tearing itself apart over land and water and pride. She looked at each of her sons in turn. But I understand why he did it. He was trying to protect all of you. From each other, mostly. By giving the worthless kid the keys to the kingdom. Garrett said bitterly. Real protective. Garrett Robert Vance. His mother's tone could have frozen water. Don't you dare. Your brother isn't worthless. He never was. And if you can't see that, if you've spent all these years thinking he was less than you, then your father was right to worry about you. The words hung in the air. Garrett looked stricken. Marcus's jaw was clenched so tight Jasper could see the muscle jumping. I don't want to fight, Jasper said quietly. I came here to find a solution. A way we can all keep what matters. What matters? Marcus turned on him. You don't even know what matters. You left. You walked away from all of this because it wasn't good enough for you. Because we weren't good enough for you. That's not why I left. Then why? Why did you disappear for 15 years? Why did you let Dad die thinking you hated him? The question hit Jasper like a physical blow. He'd asked himself the same thing 1,000 times. In the silence of his truck, in the empty hours before dawn, in every moment he'd wondered if he'd made the right choice in leaving. I left because I was drowning here, he said, the words coming from some deep, honest place he hadn't known he could access. Because Dad looked at me and saw disappointment. Because you two looked at me and saw someone who didn't measure up, and because I needed to find out if I could be something on my own, something that didn't depend on your approval or his. He stood up, facing his brothers across the table. Behind them, on the wall, hung a photo from 20 years ago, the three of them with their father after a successful roundup, all grinning, arms around each other's shoulders. They'd been a family once, before pride and expectations and unspoken resentments had driven wedges between them. I know you don't think I deserve a place here, Jasper continued. But Dad did. He gave me the water rights not to punish you, but because he thought I was the only one who could see past my own interests, the only one who might find a way to bring us back together instead of tearing us further apart. And have you, Garrett asked, found a way? Jasper pulled out the last document, Sarah's proposal, the partnership agreement. I have. If you're willing to listen. Marcus took the partnership agreement with reluctant hands. He and Garrett read it together, their expressions shifting as they worked through the terms. Jasper waited, standing at the head of the table where his father used to sit, watching his brothers process what he was offering. This gives you equal share, Marcus said finally. Equal voice in all decisions. Yes, after 15 years of absence, after contributing nothing to the ranch's success, I'm contributing the water rights. Without them, there is no ranch. Garrett looked up from the document. This is dated yesterday. You had this drawn up before you told us about any of this. I worked with an attorney to create a fair proposal. Something that acknowledges everyone's interests. Fair, Marcus repeated, the word bitter in his mouth. You want to talk about fair? Garrett and I have spent our entire lives working this land. Bleeding for it, sweating for it. And you show up with documents Dad hid from us and expect us to just... What? Welcome you home with open arms. I expect you to make a rational decision about your future. About the ranch's future? Rational, Marcus shook his head. You know what's rational. Fighting this. Contesting Dad's will, proving he wasn't in his right mind when he set this up. You can try, Jasper said quietly. My attorney says you won't win. The documents are properly executed and recorded. Dad was of sound mind right up until he died. But you can spend years in court fighting it if you want. Spend whatever the ranch is worth on legal fees. Watch the operation fall apart while we're all tied up in litigation. Or we can accept that we're being blackmailed by our own brother. Or you can accept that we're all in this together now. That the only way forward is forward together. Garrett set down the document and rubbed his face with both hands. I need to understand something. If we refuse this partnership, if we tell you to go to hell, what happens? Jasper had known this question would come, had prepared for it. Then I enforce the water rights, cut off your access to the springs and wells. The ranch becomes unsustainable. You'd have to sell the cattle, lease out the grazing rights to whoever I allow, or abandon the operation entirely. So it is blackmail. It's reality. The same reality Dad lived with for 30 years, the same choice he struggled with every day, whether to tell you the truth and risk tearing the family apart, or keep the secret and watch the distance between us grow. Their mother spoke again, her voice steady. There's something else you boys need to know. Something your father told me years ago. The land can't be sold outside the family. It's a condition of the original government sale. If any of you try to sell to developers or corporations, the property reverts to federal ownership for the original purchase price, $2,000. The color drained from Marcus's face. Are you telling me we're trapped? That even if we wanted out, we couldn't sell? I'm telling you that your father made a deal 50 years ago that binds all of you. He did it thinking he was securing your futures. Whether he was right or wrong is beside the point now. The only question is what you're going to do with the reality you've been given. Silence settled over the table. The children had been sent outside to play, their innocent laughter drifting through the windows. Normal Sunday sounds on an anything but normal Sunday afternoon. Finally, Garrett spoke. I need time. Time to think about this without you standing there waiting for an answer. Take all the time you need, Jasper said. The partnership offer is open indefinitely. I'm not trying to force you into anything. Except you are, Marcus said. Just by existing, just by having those documents. You're forcing us to choose between working with you or losing everything. I'm giving you the choice Dad never gave me. He decided I didn't belong here, decided it without asking. Without explaining. I'm asking, I'm explaining, and I'm offering you a real partnership, not a takeover. Marcus stood abruptly. I need air. He walked out, the screen door slamming behind him. Garrett lingered, staring at the partnership agreement. Did you really come back just for this? For a piece of the ranch? I came back because Dad asked me to. Because his letter said he hoped I'd choose better than he did. And because Jasper's voice caught. Because despite everything, you're still my brothers. This is still my home. And I'm tired of being on the outside looking in. Something shifted in Garrett's expression. Not acceptance, exactly, but maybe understanding. Maybe the first crack in the wall between them. Give us a week, Garrett said. We'll talk. Figure out what we can live with. A week is fine. Garrett nodded and followed Marcus outside, leaving Jasper alone at the table with his mother and the wives, who'd sat silent through the entire confrontation. His mother came to him, took his hand. You did well, she said softly. Your father would be proud. They hate me. They're scared and confused and angry, but they'll come around. They have to, because deep down, they know you're right. They know this is the only way forward. Jasper looked out the window at his brothers, standing together in the yard, talking in low voices, united against him, at least for now. He'd done what his father had asked. He'd chosen differently, chosen honesty over secrets, chosen confrontation over silence. Now he had to wait and see if it had been enough. The week passed slowly. Jasper returned to the dusty corner each day, working on the building itself now instead of just the secrets it contained. He replaced broken windows, patched the roof, cleared out decades of debris and neglect. Physical work that gave his hands something to do while his mind circled endlessly around what would happen next. Marcus called on Wednesday. The conversation was brief, awkward. "We're talking to our own attorney. Want to verify everything you told us." "That's smart. I expected you would. Sarah Mitchell says you paid her bill in advance. Covered her time so we could get independent legal advice. I want you to be sure. I want you to know I'm not trying to cheat you." A long pause. "I'll call you when we're ready to talk." Garrett texted on Friday morning. "Can you meet us at the property tomorrow, 10 a.m.? Jasper's heart hammered as he typed back, "I'll be there." Saturday morning was clear and cool, the kind of early October day that hints at coming winter without quite committing to it. Jasper arrived at the dusty corner at 9:30 and spent the extra time straightening up, making the place presentable. He'd brought coffee and pastries from the bakery in town, a peace offering or maybe just a way to occupy his nervous hands. His brothers arrived together in Marcus's truck, pulling up exactly at 10. They climbed out slowly, looking at the building with new eyes, seeing it not as a worthless ruin, but as the key to everything they'd worked for. "You've been working on it," Garrett observed. Seemed right. If it's going to be important, it should look the part. They stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Marcus cleared his throat. "We talked to 3 different attorneys. They all said the same thing. The documents are solid, the water rights are yours, and we can't fight it without destroying everything. I'm sorry Dad put us in this position." "Are you?" Marcus met his eyes. "Are you really sorry, or are you glad he finally gave you leverage over us?" Jasper considered the question carefully. "Both, maybe. I'm sorry it took this to bring me back. But I'm glad I'm back. Glad I have a reason to be here that you can't just dismiss." Garrett kicked at the gravel, hands in his pockets. "We've been running that ranch for 15 years without you. We're good at it. Know every inch of that land, every head of cattle, every challenge and opportunity. The thought of bringing in a partner who doesn't know any of that. It's hard, I know. But," Garrett glanced at Marcus, who gave a small nod. "We also looked at the numbers, looked at what we'd need to pay for water rights if we had to lease them on the open market. And we looked at what the ranch could be if we had capital to expand, to improve, to actually grow instead of just survive. The partnership agreement gives us structure," Marcus added. "Equal say means you can't force decisions on us. But it also means we can't freeze you out. We'd have to work together, actually communicate, actually—" He stopped, jaw working. "Actually be brothers again. Is that what you want?" Jasper asked. "What I want is for the last 15 years to be different. For Dad to have told us the truth. For you to have stayed. For this whole mess to not exist." Marcus's voice was rough. "But we don't get what we want. We get what we have. And what we have is a choice between working together or losing everything Dad built. That's not much of a choice." "No, it's not." Marcus pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "But maybe it's the choice we needed. Maybe Dad knew we'd never choose to work together unless we had to." He handed Jasper the paper. It was the partnership agreement, signed by both brothers. "We added some terms," Garrett said. "You have to actually work. Can't just collect a check. Have to learn the operation, contribute real labor. We're not carrying a partner who doesn't pull his weight. I wouldn't expect you to. And major purchases over 50,000 need unanimous agreement. We're not going to bankrupt the operation on some scheme you think up without our input. Fair. And," Marcus's voice softened slightly, "family dinner every Sunday, at the ranch. You, us, Mom, the kids, like it used to be." Jasper felt something tighten in his throat. "I can do that." They stood there, 3 brothers in the shadow of a gas station that had turned out to be so much more. The silence between them was different now, still uncomfortable, still weighted with 15 years of distance. But maybe, underneath, the first hint of possibility. "There's something else," Jasper said. He led them inside, down the stairs, into the bunker. They followed, their expressions moving from skepticism to wonder as they descended into the preserved Cold War facility. In the records room, Jasper showed them their father's journal, let them read the entries about worry and regret and the burden of secrets. Watched their faces as they understood, really understood, what Big Daddy had been carrying all those years. He was trapped, Garrett said quietly, by his own choices. And he was. Trying to keep us from making the same mistakes, Marcus added. Trying to force us to do what he couldn't. Actually talk to each other. Actually work together. They spent 2 hours in the bunker, reading files, exploring rooms, piecing together the history of the place and their father's role in it. When they emerged back into sunlight, something had shifted, not fixed. Nothing could fix 15 years in a morning, but shifted, moved, changed. "We start Monday," Marcus said. "You show up at dawn at the ranch. We'll put you to work. I'll be there." "And Jasper," Marcus stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I'm sorry for how we treated you, for the jokes, for making you feel like you didn't belong. I'm sorry I left without explaining why." Garrett extended his hand. After a moment, Jasper took it. Then Marcus offered his, and they stood there, the three of them, hands clasped in a circle like they used to do as boys before heading out on some adventure. "We're going to screw this up sometimes," Garrett said. "Going to fight, going to disagree." "Probably," Jasper agreed. "But we'll figure it out. Because we're family, and because we don't have a choice. And because," Marcus added, his voice gruff, "maybe it's time we actually tried being brothers again." They drove away separately, but with plans to meet Monday morning. Jasper stood in front of the dusty corner and looked at the building with new eyes. It wasn't a ruin anymore. Wasn't a secret or a burden or a weapon. It was a beginning. Later that evening, Jasper returned with a sign he'd had made in town. He mounted it carefully above the door, the wood fresh and the paint bright. It read, "Vance Family Holdings, SD 2025. Not Big Daddy Vance, not Marcus or Garrett or Jasper alone. Family." His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "So proud of you. Welcome home, son." Jasper stood in the cooling evening air, watching the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and red and purple. The land stretched out in all directions, beautiful and severe and unforgiving. The same land his father had worked, the same land his grandfather had worked. Now it was his turn, his and his brothers, together. The weight his father had carried for 30 years. The secrets, the fears, the isolation, none of that belonged to Jasper. He'd chosen differently, chosen honesty and confrontation and the hard work of rebuilding broken connections. Sometimes a father's greatest inheritance isn't what glitters. Sometimes it's the challenge to become better than he was, to learn from his mistakes, to find courage where he found fear. Jasper locked the door and drove toward town as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Tomorrow was Sunday. Family dinner at the ranch. He'd be there.